Our world is filled with natural wonders. As with other naturalists fueled with curiosity, I've endeavored to understand as much as I can about these wonders. A timeless and invaluable tool that most naturalists use is a journal. A journal not only helps the naturalist to reflect upon his observations, but protects the observations from the human memory, which is notorious for distorting and neglecting details. I am passionate about my studies and love to share with anybody willing to engage. This is why I create and share my nature journal. This week, we had time to assess the damage from the previous week's flood, and in many places it was quite severe. Over half of our bridges were washed away. Most of them, though, we should be able to salvage the materials and rebuild a new bridge. Many of them are even intact still, just farther downstream. The water was so high that some of the bridges are now on dry land. And while doing my first tour after the flood, a chickadee kept landing on my camera, reminding me that I owed my toll. Much of the creekside vegetation was washed away and drowned. Perhaps one of the most disheartening losses was that of the narrow-leaf glade fern. Although these ferns are common other places, we have very few at the Spring Farm Cares Sanctuary. It was also quite a shame to see a monarch washed away in the flood. After every heavy rain, there are piles of drowned worms in the creek. The population of these subterranean wigglers must be extraordinarily high. In one section of one of our creeks in particular, the habitat was changed quite drastically. Deep pools were dug out, and what used to be silty bottom is now rocky, and even some bedrock is now exposed. Some of these new habitats created will probably increase the biodiversity at our sanctuary. The beavers have built a series of about 6 ponds, all but the very first pond had dams that blew out. This left a series of mud flats. Fortunately, the beavers were all staying in the first main pond, which the dam did hold up. They did spend the winter down in the 4th pond, so this gave us an opportunity to examine the work they did all winter. This is a good look at the dam, built mostly of mud and sticks. This is one of the lodges that the Kits built. We don't believe they slept in there, but they did spend a lot of time snacking inside. Here was the main lodge, built almost touching the dam. Also, this hole they dug into the side of the bank may have been used as a lodge.
And this was the food cache. They spent the entire fall gathering wood from the poplar family, such as aspen and willow, and then eating it throughout the winter. Despite the flooding, life in the main beaver pond is proceeding as usual. The beavers are still coming out in the early afternoon to receive their daily rations.
Where are you going to find those in the wild? What are those on your back?
And there has been a family of ducks that have moved in. And we have found that the seed that we typically put out for the birds and the muskrats are also being enjoyed by the fish. They especially love the peanuts. One afternoon in the beaver pond, we noticed this insect swimming around. It looks like a stick bug, but it's not. After looking it up, we found that it is a water scorpion. Unlike stick bugs, water scorpions are predatory.
Vegetation up against the dam.
They feed mostly on other insects, but will also feed on tadpoles and small fish, in which they will pierce with their mouth and inject a saliva that will dissolve it from the inside. The water scorpion wasn't the only interesting insect we've had this week. There was also this beetle I have yet to identify. Also, there were some more butterflies. Here is a kama butterfly of the Polygonia genus. Different species of kamas are difficult to distinguish from one another because they look so similar and their ranges overlap. That being said, I believe this is the gray kama. Looking down from the top, it is very similar to the eastern kama. However, from looking below, the little kama-like marking tapers off at the ends a little more than in the eastern. Furthermore, the heavy striations on the underwings are a good distinguishing factor. All of the kamas do have a lot in common. They are typically more associated with woodlands than they are meadows, and rather than nectaring on flowers, they will more often sip sap seeping out of trees. Or they will sip mud puddles as this one is doing. Another common characteristic between most kamas is their wintering habits. Most kamas, such as this gray kama, do not migrate in the winter. Rather, they will find a place in a tree cavity and overwinter there. They can even be seen flying on warm, sunny winter days. Then, when spring finally arrives, they will be ready to mate. Over at the drained beaver pond is a red admiral. These are fairly common butterflies and difficult to confuse with any others. Their major host plants are members of the nettle family, and they do migrate south during the winter. As butterflies are becoming more common, so are the dragonflies. This is a widow skimmer, and he's a juvenile male. When he's a fully developed adult, his abdomen will become a chalky bluish white. And at that point, it could be confused with its close relative, the common whitetail. Here is a fully mature adult common whitetail. Notice the black on the wings don't touch the body. Whitetails and widow skimmers often inhabit the same ponds and can be seen chasing each other around, fighting. And this dragonfly is a meadowhawk. As the name suggests, they are not quite as closely tied to water as are members of the skimmer family. They do much of their hunting in fields and meadows. They will often lay their eggs in temporary ponds, which will dry up, and when the rains replenish the ponds, the eggs will continue their development. There are a few different species of meadowhawk this could be: the white-faced meadowhawk, the cherry-faced meadowhawk, or the ruby meadowhawk. It is difficult to tell for sure, especially because it is not fully mature yet. However, judging by the thickness and length of the abdomen, I'm suspecting it is the cherry-faced meadowhawk. One group of insects I'm particularly interested in learning more about this summer are the orthopterans. Like most orders of insects, this is a diverse group. The orthopterans include grasshoppers, crickets, and katydids. Unlike many groups of insects, most of the orthopterans we find here in North America are native. Only a handful have been introduced in the past few hundred years. Part of the intrigue is the songs that can be heard in the fields on a hot summer day. All too often, it seems, these songs remind me of a mystery that's just a little too far out of reach. I've made it a goal to learn the species inhabiting our sanctuary, even if it is going to be a slow, arduous process. I'll begin with this one, the two-striped grasshopper. Like many orthopterans, they can be a great agricultural pest. The two-striped grasshopper belongs to the family of spur-throated grasshoppers. Spur-throated grasshoppers are named for the ventral spine they have immediately in front of the forelegs. Spur-throated grasshoppers typically have medium-sized heads and bodies and thread-like antennae. Interestingly, none of them stridulate to make the loud songs of most other orthopterans. The two-striped grasshopper is fairly common throughout North America and often associated with tall, lush vegetation and disturbed sites. The two-striped grasshopper can be easily identified by its olive to yellowish-green body and the two yellow stripes bordered with black running almost parallel from the head through the thorax, then converging at a V at the tip of the wings. The hind tibia are variable in color, but often reddish to orangish. These next two grasshoppers caused me quite a bit of confusion while trying to ID them. Then it struck me, these are not adult grasshoppers, they are nymphs. Grasshoppers typically go through 5 to 6 instars before they reach full maturity. Each instar look slightly different than the adult. Although these two specimens superficially look different, I believe they are the same species. Notice the similarities. The relatively small antenna, the rounded head and face, the somewhat robust body, and the bold black herringbone pattern on the hind femurs. I am fairly certain that these are nymphs of the differential grasshopper, another member of the spur-throated grasshopper family. The final orthopteran I have to mention is the one that's been buzzing in the background of many of the previous clips, the Rossell's katydid. Katydids differ than grasshoppers in a few obvious manners. One is that the antennae are typically much longer than the body in katydids. And second, where grasshoppers rub their leg against their wing in order to produce a song, the katydids produce their songs by rubbing their two wings together. The Rossell's katydid is predaceous. It hunts other insects. It will also scavenge on dead insects, including that of its own kind, and occasionally eat vegetation. Notice how short the wings are on these Rossell's katydids. There are, however, long-winged morphs of this same species. The yellow-bordered black shield of this katydid make it unmistakable. This is one of the few non-native orthopterans that seems to have established itself here in North America. It was introduced into Canada in the 1950s and seems to be slowly expanding its range southward. Our mission at Spring Farm Cares Nature Sanctuary is to protect wildlife and enhance habitat around central New York. We thank everybody for supporting us, and if anyone has any questions, comments, would like to learn more, or schedule a tour with us, please check out our website or find us on Facebook.